Joins us here in our Firehouse studio, the author of a number of books, including The Holocaust Industry, Image and Reality of the Israel-Palestine Conflict and Beyond Chutzpah. His forthcoming book about Israel's assault on Gaza is due out at the end of the year, on the first anniversary of the attack. We welcome you to Democracy Now! Now, this report has just really come out hours ago. Perhaps you're among the few people outside those who have written the report who have actually read the majority of its contents. Talk about the significance of this.
Well, the report is the last in a large number of reports that have been issued on the Gaza massacre. There were 2 significant reports issued by Amnesty International, 5 reports issued by Human Rights Watch, and a whole slew of Israeli-based human rights organizations have issued reports. But this was the most awaited report of all of them. It was commissioned by the UN Human Rights Council, and Richard Goldstone, as you mentioned in your own introductory remarks, is a significant international figure, legal figure. The report basically is consistent with the findings of the other human rights organizations that Israel targeted civilians. Israel targeted civilians who were carrying white flags. Israel systematically targeted the Palestinian infrastructure. The findings were consistent with those of the other human rights organizations. Israel is guilty of a very significant number of war crimes. And also the findings, which were other reports, the same conclusions, that the Palestinians were not using hospitals to hide Hamas officials. There's no evidence that the ambulances Israel targeted were carrying Hamas militants or ammunition. And most significantly, in terms of the coverage during the Gaza massacre, the report found, as did Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, there's no evidence whatsoever, and I would want to underline that, there's no evidence whatsoever that Hamas was guilty of human shielding. But on the other hand, there is significant evidence, actually copious evidence, that Israel was guilty of human shielding.
But on other issues of Palestinian militants committing crimes against humanity?
The report found that the Palestinians were guilty of war crimes because of its indiscriminate and intentional firing on civilians in Israel. I'm not trying to make any apologies, but I want to get the facts right. The Goldstone report, like the Amnesty report and the others, you have to look carefully at the proportions. About 9/10, literally about 9/10 of the Goldstone report, like the Dugard report, like the Amnesty report, about 9/10 was devoted to Israeli war crimes, about 1/10 was devoted to Palestinian war crimes. And you have to understand why, because you have to look at the comparable damage. The ratio of killings was about 100 to 1, about exactly 13 on the Israeli side, about 1,400 on the Palestinian side. If you look at the damage is actually quite astonishing. Israel just systematically blasted everything in sight and reduced it to rubble. Whereas on the Israeli side, they say that several houses were damaged and one was almost completely destroyed. So if you look at the facts on the ground, the proportions in the reports, including the Goldstone report, are correct. It's about 10 to 1. And that's why today's headline in the New York Times is so misleading. It's like a Pravda headline. It says the Goldstone report finds both sides guilty of war crimes. Well, that's technically true, but an accurate headline would have read, Goldstone reports Israel guilty of massive war crimes and also faults Hamas. That's what a true headline would have read.
Well, Israel refused to cooperate with the investigation and has claimed the UN Human Rights Council that ordered it was biased against Israel. This is some of what the Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Yigal Pamor, had to say about the inquiry.
This fact-finding mission was established in sin This is why Israel was unable to cooperate with it. The resolution in virtue of which the Commission was established was so extreme in its phrasing and in its prejudging of any conclusion that all European countries and other democratic countries did not support it. It was adopted with the support of human rights models such as Libya, Bangladesh, Cuba. This, of course, has no moral value whatsoever. So we didn't feel that this was binding in any way. In spite of everything I've just said, Israel is going to study this report, to examine it very carefully, as we have with all national and international human rights reports. We are taking this seriously, and we are committed, as always, to abide by international law.
Israel's response to the Goldstone report. Your response, Norman Finkelstein.
Well, Richard Goldstone is a very respected jurist, and he also has a long record of being very supportive of Israel. If I'm not mistaken, he sits on the Hebrew University of Jerusalem Board of Directors. Now, when the UN Human Rights Council asked Goldstone to chair the mission, originally, his mandate was just to investigate Israeli crimes. He himself said he